Now let us do a short exercise of few sentences changing the passive voice to active voice. Just an exercise for us to change the passive here into active. Change from passive to active. Change from passive to active, into active. And that's what we are going to do, just few sentences. Okay? We are going to change from passive into active voice. Let's look at the first sentence I have here for you. Passive voice. By whom was this book written? By whom was this book written? That's the passive voice. And we're going to change it into active. Who wrote this book? Okay. So the first one is by whom. By whom was this? By whom was this book written? By whom was this book written? And that's the passive voice. That's the passive voice. And here we're going to change this passive voice into active. And let's look at it. Who wrote this book? Who wrote? Who wrote? Who wrote this book? And that's the active. That's the active voice. Okay, another sentence for you. He was called a fool. He was called. He was called. He was called a fool. That's the passive voice. Passive voice. He was called a fool. That's the passive voice. Passive voice. And we're going to change this passive voice into active. They called him a fool. They called him. They called him a fool. That's the active voice. Okay. Another sentence for you. My watch has been stolen. That's the passive voice. My watch has been stolen. My watch. My watch has been stolen. That's the passive voice. Passive voice. My watch has been stolen. Passive voice. And we're going to change it into active. Someone has stolen my watch. Someone has stolen. Someone has stolen my watch. That's active. My watch. Someone has stolen my watch, and that's the active voice. Active voice. Okay. Then one more sentence. A story was told to them by me. A story was told. A story was told to them. To them by me. By me. That's the passive voice. A story was told to them by me. That's the passive voice. Passive voice. And when we change that into active, I told them a story. So, I told them. I told them a story. That's the active voice. I told them a story. That is into active. Now, in these 4 sentences, what have we done? We have changed from passive to active. So far, we are doing from active changing to passive. Here, by whom was this book written? Passive voice. He was called a fool. Passive voice. My watch has been stolen. Passive voice. A story was told to them by me. Passive voice. Now, we're changing all into active. By whom was this book written? Who wrote this book? Active. He was called a fool. Passive voice. They called him a fool. Active voice. My watch has been stolen. Passive. Someone has stolen my watch. Active. And finally, a story was told to them by me. Passive. I told them a story. Active. So in these sentences, we learn to change from the passive into active voice.